Okay, fantastic. So we've got another episode of a mini episode of the Great Gower Conference with Over a Brew, and I'm joined by 4 fabulous people that I'm going to ask to introduce themselves in a moment. I don't need to introduce myself again if you've watched the previous 2, so I'm going to start over here with my colleague.
Hi, my name's Phil Jones. I'm Teaching and Learning Manager at NPTC Group of Colleges.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Nicola Brandon and I'm Director of Digital Innovation for Teaching and Learning at NPTC Group of Colleges.
My name is Tibby. I professionally make coffee in the office and I also do digital learning and innovation at Cymoedd.
My name's Nielsen Cole. I'm Manager of Teaching and Learning at Pembroke College.
Fantastic. So we've been focusing on some really key themes that have come out of the conference today. But what I'd like to talk to you about is kind of managing teacher workload, managing the ability to kind of do some of the heavy lifting for teachers. But I also want to move into that initial teacher education space and how, you know, it's important, really focusing on AI. So I'm going to start with a question and then I'll either ask you to dive in or I'll just watch the look of fear and then go, right, you go first. I'd like to think, if we do, about teacher workload in the first instance. I'm going to come to you, Phil, actually. Teacher workload. How have you seen AI impacting on teacher workload?
One of the things that I have seen is the tasks that teachers routinely do, for example, thinking of questions, developing schemes of work, rather than taking 4 or 5 hours, they can actually get through those in half the time. And therefore, it allows them to spend time on the quality of what they're actually doing.
Absolutely. And Nelson, I'm going to come to you because you've got similar roles to Phil, haven't you, at Pembrokeshire? So what are you seeing as the sort of initial impacts on teacher workload?
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at a lot of platforms that have come out from generative AI, planning has become something that is fluent. It's something that would normally become a barrier sometimes. You get that block and what can I teach? And it's almost like having that partner that you can work with. And I think like platforms, if I'm thinking some of my colleagues use, such as like Carmigo. So Carmigo as a planning tool can be really effective in chunking text, generating text, all of those things that would take time.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to come to Nicola and Tibby on this. What are people coming to you as teachers asking for support with? What kind of tools are they coming to you and asking for?
We have had a few requests now for marking tools, which we're still treading carefully with the marking tools because, you know, you do need consent of students. It's their intellectual property, so you can't just be putting it into any random sort of LLM, you know, to put it to get some marking. But it's definitely an area that, you know, we need to be investigating, and we are already piloting different platforms, and because that is a massive workload for teachers, isn't it?
And that's quite interesting. Tibby, I'm going to come to you on that, but that's quite interesting because you've both talked about the planning, but now we're looking at the other end. So people have bought into AI can be helpful as a productivity tool, right? So now you're saying people are now starting to investigate what next. Tibby, was it the same for your college? What are people asking you about?
Very similar. So in our college, initially a lot of colleagues were coming around wanting tools that could quickly create presentations, which was another bit, it's time consuming. Planning was another one, and feedback, and again, as the feedback and marking as well, which we are very careful because, well, I haven't seen good tools that can do that consistently, and I know there's some products out there that are trying to do this, but also if we're looking at across our college, all of the different topics and different subjects we're looking at, I can't see tools that could cover everything, not yet anyway. No. So for us, initially, it's around lesson planning, ideation, and then creating resources, in particular presentations, but also quizzes. A lot of people wanted to quickly spin out formative assessment.
The other thing I would also say is it gives some initial ideas, and sometimes they think, oh, I'm stuck. What can I do on this topic? And they say, can you give me some ideas? And it helps them to formulate what their lessons will be. They still have to use their expertise,
Yes.
but it gives them that initial idea which they can build upon.
I think that's really important there, and I'm going to ask you, sorry, Tim.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, well, good.
There's three things I want to pick up on. One, you said they have to use their initial expertise. I think that's really important that we echo this in this conversation, isn't it? That it's not replacing the integrity of the lecturer. It's a tool, it's an assistance, it's something in our kit bag. And marking, we're all a bit uncertain about it because I think we feel a bit uncomfortable about handing something over to something else. But feedback we're comfortable with. So I'm going to explore feedback. And I think that's the conversation you got today. Why is it okay for feedback rather than marking? Because I think those are two distinct things.
I think we have to make that distinction between the two.
Yeah.
Marking essentially is summative. It's how well you've done right at the end of that part, but when we're talking about feedback, I think it can be really effective in actually enhancing the feedback that's being given. Sometimes when you have those 30 essays and you're going through those essays, cognitive load, you're going to start repeating some of the things that you've been saying, and it's an opportunity to actually use AI to say, these are the targets that are coming out, this is what I'm noticing, what am I missing?
Yeah.
And it could be almost like that critical friend, that mentor, that sometimes you don't have that opportunity to have those conversations. So as a feedback tool, I think quite empowering.
One thing we looked at when we started to have a look at that is the need for consistency, and the AI tools, I think, give the possibility, perhaps not now, but in the future, of having consistency, because they learn from your marking, and so they give a prediction of the comments that they are giving. They will say, right, I'm 59 or 60% sure that this comment I'm making is appropriate based on the marking I've seen you do. So they are learning from our marking.
That's interesting, because that's when it moves into productivity space, isn't it? It's about efficiency of language, but then that helps because that's you as your authentic marking voices coming through, which is actually quite scary, right? But really effective.
And looking forward, you still have control over whether those comments are actually generated by AI, or if you disagree, you can disagree with it.
That's the third.
For me, that's the main difference, that you go directly into editor mode, rather than into the person doing the first draft, which is what I think someone's referring to as well. You use AI as a drafting tool for your ideas. One of the main advantages of generative AI that you can also prompt it to reason the way you want it to reason. You can give it examples of your own language, like you were saying, in terms of providing a rubric and previous feedback. So there's a lot to work around with that. But I think that consistency around marking is a different conversation for me altogether. And like Nicola mentioned, it's very high stakes for me, whereas feedback is not as high stakes as that. Planning as well, just to jump a little bit back to that. If AI reasons differently and we want to bring it to teacher training, for me it's an invaluable tool to get the AI to reason planning through different lenses, different perspectives of learning, different perspectives of planning, or whatever you want to, cycles of reflection and so on. It would be really cool to do that very quickly, to spin that out on different ideas. And I think that's something that's missing on an ideation point of view, never mind technology, enhancing with technology what you do.
And as if Magic's where I kind of, because both of you are involved with initial teacher education, as am I, and you have as well, Nicola. So Tippy's brought it up and it's absolutely pertinent. Where do we see the space for AI in initial teacher education? I'm going to ask you first, Nielsen.
I think when I look at our role, a huge part of it is to keep teachers teaching. And when we look at that, marking, assessment, that is that if you speak to lots of people who've left the profession, that's very often the first thing they'll mention. Why did you leave the profession? I love the kids, I love the time in the classroom, I love delivering, I love planning lessons even, but very often the assessment, the marking is something that can really hit upon a teacher's well-being.
So we've touched on feedback and well-being is quite important. So I'm going to come to you, Phil, because you really are actively involved in initial teacher education. Where do you see AI playing the role in that and the well-being of the trainees, actually?
I would say definitely the planning element. I would say producing some of the early ideas for what lesson content would have. And also, one of the things that we have to remember is that AI is now present everywhere. So they need to prepare learners for that world where AI is being used all the time.
Yeah.
And sort of creating assessments which survive in a world of AI, because the assessments of yesterday are not going to be appropriate or reliable for assessments in the future. So unless we train them on what AI can do, we won't get the assessments for the future correct. And that's my concern, is that we need to look at far more reliable methods of assessing learners.
Absolutely. And there's so many lovely little sound bites to come from this. I'm going to start bringing this to a close very quickly. But Nicola, before we do, because I'd like you to feed on this, and the question I'm then going to ask the rest of you is, you know, how do we keep teachers teaching? I'm picking on that because I love that. Nicola, what tools do you think really would be, if we were going to invest and we were going to influence initial teacher education, what would be something that you would say does what Phil's suggesting, or what Tibby's suggesting, or what Neil's suggesting? What do you say we should be incorporating in initial teacher education to do the things? Right now, 12 months could be something different, but right now, what would you say is something we could do?
Easy question.
Yeah, I know. What tools do you think you've seen most
all
success?
the digital tools as well. I've got to say that we can't lose the human side of teaching. I think that is important. And all these digital tools will augment us as humans, they assist us, and I think something like a good LLM, like Copilot or ChatGPT, you can do everything you need to do in that. Yes, you can get different wrapper apps, you know, like Teachermatic, which is an excellent tool, for, you know, which, you know, is very good for maybe teacher training, because it's got the assistance in there, like lesson planning, schemes of work. But something like Copilot, you're actually getting to learn how to use AI and how to prompt and how to, you know, how to use it maybe properly rather than a packaged tool. But, you know, I think for teacher trainers, I think, you know, it's very important to keep that human element and that human oversight in anything you create, content-wise, planning, feedback, definitely. You know, it's the AI doesn't know the person. I know we shouldn't be marking the person, but when you're giving feedback, you know what sort of encouragement to give to different people, different students. You know how much effort that student has put into that work, because maybe you know how much time they've had to work, maybe you know what their previous work was like. And you don't get that maybe with the AI, and I think that sort of encouragement that comes from a human oversight is important. And I think students, when they put effort into work, they want to know that their teachers read that and, you know, has had an input into the feedback.
I'm probably going to leave it there, but I think for me, some of the best things for us all to take away, and anybody watching back, is I love that idea it augments us as a human. I love the idea it keeps teachers teaching. I really like the idea that you sort of say, and we've all said this, it's a tool. It's a tool to support us, it's a tool to grow us. But I also think we have to remember we also have a responsibility. We've got to equip our learners for the assessments of the future, for the skills of the future. So we can't not do this either. So we have to do all this, we have to maintain the integrity, but we have a responsibility to do it. Thank you so much. It's been awesome chatting to you, and I look forward to chatting to you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.